But was this necessary? Could Nehemiah have done it a different way?
He could have. I don't know how it would have worked, but there probably are other ways
It
he could have
seems
gone
like
about
they
it.
responded better to stricter rules than they did with more of a loose idea of what they should be doing.
You always kind of look at these things and say, okay, I see what he did, and was it necessary to do it the way he did? So you could look back at other places in Scripture. Could God have done something different at Mount Sinai instead of thunder and lightning? Could he have sat down and gave the Sermon on the Mount at that time?
If he would have, if it would have worked, he would have done that. Obviously, the answer is no. They didn't barely listen when he was thundering. I mean, they did listen, but they didn't take anything to heart, because how long did that last?
It takes more than 40 days to make a golden calf. Well, at least more than just the last day anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. They probably quickly did that, because they had to gather all this jewelry up and melt it down and then craft it. That wasn't like a one-day thing.
Yeah, and then convince Aaron, for example, to do so.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad for a priest to agree to something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Aaron
Plus-
didn't always make the best decisions.
No, he did not.
Yeah, especially since he was part of, all the goings on up to that point. You know. Yeah, sometimes we need that strong voice, but ultimately, does that win you over? Does that keep you?
No, for a short period of time you'll listen, but then just go back.
So the idea there is we'll give that strong voice, but then God steps back and wants to speak in the still small voice. And so it's all depending on how he needs to grab our attention. And he'll do that today too. So it's not like we're any better than they are. Oftentimes we say, well, if I lived back then, I would do thus and so. No, you wouldn't. You're just fooling yourself on that point. Because we really haven't changed. Obviously culturally, we've changed culturally, but as far as how we view God, we still view God in several of the same understandings of what the people did back then. And so, God will give us what we need. But he'd rather talk to us as a friend, as understanding friends. But if he needs to shout, because we're running out in the street, then he'll shout. He does say he disciplines those who he loves. And he loves us all. So, if we need some type of discipline to, get us to turn around and look at him, then he'll allow that. And it even says in Scripture, and we won't like it when it's happening, because who likes discipline? But we'll respond to it. And so here the people really didn't have the choice, because Nehemiah had the authority to set up these things. He had the personnel to be able to, make sure the gates were shut, not, things weren't brought in that weren't supposed to be brought in. And he was going to, he knew the seriousness of keeping the Sabbath, so he was going to force people, through his different regulations and stuff to have them keep the Sabbath. And why his intentions were good, we see where they eventually led, which once again is the Pharisees not understanding what the Sabbath was about. So Nehemiah then says, "Remember me, O God, for this also, and spare me because of your great love." So, now, once again, this is about the sixth time he says, "Remember me, O God," for what he's done. In this case, he says, "And spare me because of your great love." kind of gives you a little bit of an insight of how he views God. He definitely views God more authoritative, and
It's probably made the rules like that because they thought God would probably like the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Absolutely, because you do things that you think God's going to do. You become like the thing you worship and admire. So if I think God's like this, then I'm going to behave like that. And that's why it's so important to understand that if you have a view of God that God is love, but he's also just, or fill in the blank, it's going to change how you view what love is. Because as soon as you put that comma and that but in there, you've just erased everything that God is love is about. And then God becomes an altogether different type of person. And in that case, when saying God is love but he's also just, you're saying that love has limitations. There's a time where you don't have to love anymore. Or love is so completely foreign in the fact that it becomes abusive. And we don't accept that in society today.
Well, but is a contrast word. It's like, this is an exception. Not like and, which it can be both. It's just like, well, this so to me it
Yes.
irritates me when people say stuff like that because you just negated a big portion of what you just said with that one little word.
Yes. Because unfortunately, when they're doing it like that, God is love, but, well, we'll use the most you hear is God is love, but he's also just. The justice that they're talking about is contrary to love, and that should not be. Because is God just? Absolutely. So, but understanding biblical justice is, in that case, justice is not legal, like a legal form, law and order type justice. It's doing the right thing. So would you say this, God is love, but he also does the right thing?
That just sounds wrong.
That doesn't make sense. Of course God does the right thing. And so understanding true biblical justice, it falls under the definition of love, and so there's no contradiction, there's no contrast. It's one and the same. But there we go. Here with Nehemiah, he is definitely doing a more rules regulation. He got probably a lot of this in the culture that he grew up in. I mean, he was the cupbearer for the king, and they definitely were a law and order society. What the king said, that was law. You did it under penalty of whatever. And then seeing all that happened, why they were actually in Babylonian captivity, you can see that, man, God said these things, and if we don't do these things, he said these things would happen. And so we don't want these things to happen again, so let's get these regulations, let's get these rules, and to help you do these, we'll shut the city gates. Because these quote foreign merchants were coming in. Did you have to buy their stuff? You could say, hey dudes, it's the Sabbath, I don't need to buy your stuff.
I think he's trying to keep the people away from temptation.
Well, there you go, because obviously they were buying the stuff, and they were, even starts off, he saw that they were, the Israelites were pressing the grapes and loading grain and figs and, doing all this stuff anyway. So now if you're doing that and
Well, you can't legislate morality.
yes.
Is what he was trying to do, but it just doesn't work. You can make people not do stuff, but it's not going to make you moral just because you're not doing it. Just like, oh, I can't buy from these foreign merchants because they're not here. That doesn't make you moral, because if they were there, then you would be buying. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Exactly, but exactly what he was trying to do was legislate morality.
Didn't work so well.
It never works very well.
No.
It works for a short time, or if you do it, it makes you into very legalistic and really ultimately non-loving people.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you've got to all conform to the same standard, which someone has set up, and there's just too many issues with that. People will either, like I say, become like that and become unloving, or they're going to rebel against that and go the opposite direction. And because you can only be afraid for so long. You can only say, okay, I'm going to be forced to do this for so long, and then, okay, I'm not going to care. And so they're losing the principle behind what this is. You know, what's the principle behind the Sabbath? What's the principle behind all the 10 Commandments? You know, it's love. But we can't handle just God saying, well, love one another. What do you mean? You know, it's going back to the story of the Good Samaritan. Because the guy wanted to justify, well, who's my neighbor? He said to love my neighbor, but who's my neighbor? Because if I can define who my neighbor is, so we're going to pretend that half the class that's not there, those are my neighbors. But these over here are my neighbors, so I can love this half. Well, that's why he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, because left to our own, we'll start defining, you know, what is love? We'll define that ourselves. Then we'll define, you know, who's our neighbor. We can define, you know, our God. We can define who we say he is, and do all these things, and completely lose what's going on. So once again, sometimes we do need that strong voice to get on the straight and narrow, but God is trying to lead us to a full understanding of who he is. Picking up at verse 23, he says, "At that time I also discovered that many of the Jewish men had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Half their children spoke the language of Ashdod or some other language and didn't know how to speak our language. I reprimanded the men, called down curses upon them, beat them, and pulled out their hair. Yes. Then I made them take an oath in God's name that never again would they or their children intermarry with foreigners." Once again, how's that as a form of evangelism?
Well, it keeps people in.
Does it?
Well, if you don't want to have your beards ripped out, yes.
What about calling curses? That win you over to God?
No, but you might do what he says because you're afraid that curse might come upon you.
Mm-hmm.
They're very superstitious.
Does that make you have a good relationship with God?
No.
What do you make you think God's like? That God's
Angry, controlling, abusive.
So we're trying to go out to the community and become friends with people. Ultimately win them over to God. Now, if they're not listening to us, should we pull out their hair?
Yeah.
Should we
think
throw
that's a
curses at
solid-
them? Shall we put curses on them?
Mm-hmm.
Should we check to see who they married? When we're reading in Luke, for an example, or Matthew, and they're going through the genealogy of Jesus, are there some foreign women in there?
Yes.
So is this one of the places where we've got to take the Bible and look at what's going on at the time? Because sometimes intermarrying foreign women is perfectly okay.
But you have to ask questions. You can't just accept things blindly if you do it that way. You have to say, why is it okay here and not there? And then you learn something.
So is the Bible being contradictory?
No.
No?
Because in this time, they're marrying foreign women and their children are starting to follow the wrong gods and they're starting to follow what their wife does instead of following what their religion is.
Is it the same culture? I mean, if their kids are not even speaking,
No.
they're losing their identity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are a people that's reduced at this point down. I mean, they went from the 10 or 12 tribes to the 2 kingdoms, and then the 10 tribes disappeared into history, going down to 2 tribes, and then basically they've got Jerusalem left, after the Babylonian captivity. They have some of the surrounding areas, but, as a chosen people, they're not nearly as large a group as what they should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And now if you're intermarrying and not even teaching your kids your own culture and language,
Mm-hmm.
that is pretty hard. So in 26 he says, I told them it was foreign women who made King Solomon sin. Here was a man who was greater than any of the kings of the other nation. God loved him and made him king over all of Israel, and yet he fell into sin. Are we then to follow your example and disobey our God and marrying foreign women?
Mm-hmm. But hopefully none of them had 400 concubines, 800 concubines. Which was it for Solomon? I can't remember.
Some ridiculous.
Yeah, it was like 300 wives and some 100 concubines or something like that.
Mm.
Every couple of years you get a scene.
So, yeah, I mean, that was one of King Solomon's, because he wanted to make his wives happy, so he started building them temples to their gods. And for a long time, the wisest man in the world fell away from God. In his old age, he came back.
How does he remember all those names?
Wisest man in
I'm
the
looking
world.
at you, I'm talking to you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it all depends on what the relationship is. Because even today you see issues with that. So Joadiah, the son of whatever that guy's name is, the high priest, but one of Joadiah's sons married the daughter of Sanballat from the town of Beth Horon. So I made Joadiah leave Jerusalem. Remember, God, how those people defiled both the office of the priest and the covenant that you made with the priests and the Levites. I purified the people from everything foreign. I prepared regulations for the priests and the Levites so that each one would know their duty. I arranged for the wood to be used for the burning of the offerings to be brought at the proper times, and for the people to bring their offerings of the first grain and the first fruits that ripened. Remember all this, O God, and give me credit for it. So what kind of rules and regulations do you suppose he put up?
A textbook full of them.
There'll be a test.
Didn't say what they were. Was he making up new ones? Doesn't really say. Maybe he just went back to Leviticus and Deuteronomy and those books and said, this is what God said, this is what you're supposed to be doing. But kind of seems like to me, because by the time Jesus was around, they had over 600 rules and regulations just to make sure they kept the law that they had added.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that these are some of the ones, maybe starting here, that some of these were the ones that were added to make sure that they followed the ones that God said.
Mm-hmm.
When you're following rules and regulation, is that an easy thing to do?
No, especially when you're not doing it for any reason. According to them, they were just following them so they wouldn't break these other rules, and then you lose the reason behind. Like if you learn that if you teach your kids don't run out in the street because you get hit by a car, but if you put a whole bunch of other rules before that, you don't even know why you shouldn't be running out in the street anymore. And then it just seems ridiculous. Whereas if most people would agree running out in the street without looking is probably not a very wise thing to do. But if you don't know the original reason why, because it's been watered down by a whole bunch of other rules that really weren't part of the process, then it just all seems stupid and ridiculous, and you don't want to follow any of them because it doesn't make any sense.
Do you guys remember what God says He wanted of us? Or He wanted to have happen?
Yeah.
I want to be your God and you to be my people. Could we handle that?
No.
Obviously not.
We couldn't handle that.
That's pretty simple.
It's pretty simple. And that's how, if you read the whole Bible, that's how basically it ends. I will be your God and you will be my people. And He will dwell among us. I mean, that's what He wanted. And it's a pretty simple relationship that He wants, but if you have a list, okay, Alex comes home one day, he says, okay, honey, our marriage is going okay, but I really want to make sure it goes okay, so I've written you up a list of 20 things that you need to follow.
Oh, I'd work it up. Be like, haha, you're funny.
I needed something to line the rabbit cage with. Thanks.
Much different, wouldn't it be?
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe if once you got done beating him, you actually read the rules, you're going, what? I'm doing these things anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing it because I love Him and I want to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to a certain extent, it's our personalities to kind of reject
Mm-hmm.
the rules and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, why did God give us the 10 Commandments for an example? It's because we were lying, murdering, stealing, and doing all these things.
Mm-hmm.
We did think there were literally other gods that we got to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
And so the law and other these things were added, as it says in Galatians,
Mm-hmm.
so that they could lead us safely
Mm-hmm.
to Jesus, so we could learn the truth of what's going on, the principles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would have been wonderful if Jesus could have sat down and gave the Sermon on the Mount to the thunder and lightning and Sinai, because He's saying the same thing, it's just a different way, different form. He's saying everything He's saying all leads to love if we're willing to understand what that truly means. It's not I've got to follow these rules, I'm going to follow these principles.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get to understand that, this is the right way to live. I'm going to live this way even if someone didn't ask me to.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes sense. And it doesn't become second nature, it becomes your first nature. Unfortunately, we've lost that, and so sometimes we do need, you can't steal.
Mm-hmm.
You can't lie. You can't do these things. Well, why can't I lie? I mean, it's just a little white lie, Someone just asked me, how do you like my new hairstyle?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, it's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where do they get their self-worth from? Is it from their hair? Is it from me telling them their hair looks good even though I don't think it is? Or do they get their self-worth from God, knowing that they're a child of God? And then that, they're asking you for your true opinion because they value it. And, you don't have to say, oh, it's absolutely hideous. And you can say, oh, you've had better ones. Or I think it looks better this way. And maybe you're the only one who doesn't like it that way. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
everybody else says, oh, yeah, we really like it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just preference, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, we think we need to lie because we don't want to hurt their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are we strong enough in ourselves because we know who we are in God?
Should be.
We should be, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming down to stealing. Who really supplies for us? Is it ourselves or is it God?
God.
Mm-hmm. So, and then when we're stealing something, do we really need it?
Usually, probably not.
We go, well, my family's going to starve if I don't steal this bread. Okay, they might go hungry that night, but really,
Well, most people don't steal food. They steal like TVs and electronics and a little bit more expensive stuff. Because there's so many ways to get food if you're hungry nowadays that usually you're not going hungry. People usually don't steal food; they steal.
Now there's, in the United States, I would say that's true, but
Yeah.
there's other
Well, in
places.
other places, yes. I was just saying around here.
Yeah. But, I mean, when we stop and really think about it, who supplies all our needs? Me because I've got a job? Or because God because he's given me the talent and the job and everything else? We really got to stop and think. We live and breathe every breath because God allows it.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we're in a hard time, then, is it choice between stealing food or trying to make some phone calls or trying to do some other stuff, can we go to our next door neighbor and say, man, can you spare some top ramen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a prideful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you want to set your pride aside, and maybe that's what God's teaching us.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know. I mean, you really got to stop and look at the motivation and who is really in charge and what has God allowed us or not allowed us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some, asking for help is, they'd rather go steal something.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, what does that do to you? Where's your reliance at that point?
Mm-hmm.
So.
And sometimes it's just greed has.
Oh yeah, sometimes yeah, absolutely.
Food is different when your family's starving, but sometimes you have enough, but
Yeah.
you just want more.
Well, I use food because some people will say, well, it's not right for someone to starve. Yeah, you're right. It's not right for someone to starve.
Mm-hmm.
But, but it's easy to say, okay, well, if I steal a car or a TV, maybe I think I deserve it, but yeah, I can understand why you can say that. But food's a different thing, or medicine.
Oh, I wasn't arguing with
this.
you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was using that as an example. So, remember all this, O God, and give me credit for it. Are we earning our salvation? Is that what that says?
That's what he seems to think.
I mean, he did a lot of good things. I mean, he got Israel back on track, became a nation again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unfortunately, about 400 or so years later, it did got destroyed again. But he got the people of Israel, at least after this point, because when Jesus showed up, he didn't have to tell them not to worship other idols.
Worship idols, you mean?
Yeah. That's
True.
true.
Or other gods.
Other gods.
That's what I think you were going with.
Other gods. That's what I was going with.
Good
yes.
catch, Michael.
To see if you were paying attention.
It was.
And then, he didn't have to tell them about tithing or go down the list.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were apparently blueprinting, we'll call them Adventists,
Mm-hmm.
because they were waiting for the first event of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the rules go, you couldn't kick them out of church today.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as a loving group of people,
Not so much.
at least the religious leaders, they were not. I mean, they got so, they were supposed to be a light into the world, and they got to the point that they felt that even if a shadow of a Gentile passed across them, they'd become unclean. How can they reach the others about God if that's how they felt?
Can't even
That
be
they,
with it.
I hate to say it, they really became, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't like another group.
Xenophobic?
No, xenophobic. What's it easier? Racist. It was hard for Peter to go.
Ethnocentric.
Huh?
Ethnocentric.
That's a good word. Yeah. Peter had to have a special vision when the tablecloth came down with all the unclean food, which was symbolic. It wasn't say that you can now eat all those foods. It was about people,
Mm-hmm.
and because they thought the other Gentiles were unclean and unworthy.
Mm-hmm.
They really didn't think they were of the same class.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they were lost, so why bother with them? And, it was a special vision that Peter then realized, okay, no,
Mm-hmm.
all are God's children, which was a major change in their thought process. And he still reverted back, unfortunately.
Paul.
And Paul had to come in his face in person, in public,
Mm-hmm.
and set him back right again, because Peter started not eating with him again after that vision and stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
It was a big deal to go from, Jewish people to understanding that it was to the whole world. And that was part of their unlearning that they had to do. Now, oftentimes it's easier to get an unlearned, Christian person to understand what God wants and stuff than someone who's been in church all their lives. Because they're definitely cultured up to a certain point where they think this is how we have to behave, and it's been different. So, what do you think about the overall book of Nehemiah? I mean, he's gone and went through struggles and persecution and, threats on his life and all this to get to the point where he's got the people on the straight and narrow. How do we apply that to our lives?
Well, I'd say don't threaten people with curses and stuff. I don't think we can go about things the same way as he did. It might work for him back in the day, but he get arrested for what he does.
Well, if you're in certain churches, certain congregations, it might not threaten you with curses,
But they
but
might try to excommunicate you if you don't behave.
they can do similar type of things. They can shun you. Yes.
Threaten you to
They
burn in hell
they
for
could,
eternity.
blackball
Yeah,
you.
that's true.
And they could do a lot of different things. Certain churches think that the problem with church is that we're not traditional enough. And we need to really get these rules set up straight. So they'll sit there and they'll do things like they'll add a song service in between Sabbath school and church because people are actually talking in church and intermingling, and that's not reverent enough. So we'll give them something to occupy themselves with. They'll play chimes to let them know it's really now serious time to be holy. They'll do stuff like decide that the foot in communion and foot washing that they should separate the men from the women. So now you can't do family foot washing. You can't do stuff like that because we need to get back to tradition. That's the problem. Not understanding that all these rules and regulations are putting walls up against us and God. So, of course, we can swing the other direction too. So you got to be, careful of both extremes, and understanding that it's our relationship with God that we're needing and that we're after. So, how can we look at our church and say, this is how we're going to apply? So,
Sorry, it's the Aston family.
it's the Aston family.
I wanted to join you, but I gave blood and then I gave more blood after they were done taking blood. So
Oh, wow. Special.
So you'll be
Hi.
sitting today.
I'm gonna sit.
Yes.
I think I have a problem.
Little sprinkler system.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm doing an arterial draw today just for fun.
Yeah.
Are we going to have enough today?
Are we gonna have enough today?
Yeah.
No. But we'll give it a good shot.
Mhm.
Do you get blood?
I can get blood.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Okay,
I
that'll be
will
5.
try to get blood today, but
That'll be
we'll see how-
6.
We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
I'm undecided. I felt so horrible.
I'm still not wanting you to do it.
Okay,
Well,
there
you
you go.
could try it to see if that was the real problem or not. Or
Yeah, but I felt bad for so long after that. I'm afraid to.
Hospital stays and everything.
It did that to Lane.
Did it do that to Lane?
Lane had the same thing.
But
Really?
She gave blood. She's been giving blood since
For
before
years.
we dated.
Well, I think she had 2.
Oh.
And then she had this episode that it was the same thing. Dizzy, going to the doctor, and yeah, it was similar.
Yeah, I passed out and seized. Craig said. I don't remember any of that. I just remember being.
Lane didn't do that, but she was sick.
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's
My
okay.
apologies.
No, that's good. So we just read the last of Nehemiah, and so we're saying, okay, Now we talked about the last of it. Now we're saying, okay, overall, what do you get out of it, and how do we apply this to our church today?
Of all of Nehemiah.
So we're wondering if you're going to pull out people's hair.
I don't know. If you did free waxing, you might get people coming here right there, you know? Like people
They
pay
probably
a lot
want
of money.
something different than I would want to do, though. Yeah, I would say no, thank you. Well, it seems to me that there's certainly a message of working together
Yeah.
and working where we are, what's in front of me, because they built where their homes were, they built where their business was, they built where they were, which is one of the things that we've been having a little discussion about is how do we then, okay, so we can all come together here, but we all live, where do you live?
Out on KP.
Okay, so
So
you're
further
like,
away from us.
okay,
even.
so you're way out, and you're in Gig Harbor, and we're in Auburn, and we've got Fuentes are in Puyallup, and Henderson's are pert near Graham. We've got Penny's are in Spanaway, Hollenbeck's are in Spanaway. Let's see, who else? If Chris were still coming, she's up in Kent. You know, people are just out
We're
and
all spread
everywhere.
out.
They're just
Yeah.
really spread out. So how do we take this concept and say, what can I do where I live? What can I do where I work, where I live, work, and play? And just live Jesus where I live, work, and play. Come here to be encouraged and edified and lifted up, to work where I live, work, and play.
I mean, that's definitely one of the things they did. They built the walls that were the section of wall where they lived by.
That's right. That's what they
And
did.
then they all got together. This was a one-time event, but and then had a dedication of the wall
Right.
where they all participated.
Right, and you celebrate.
Mhm.
And so we come together, and you talk about, hey, this week at work, this thing happened with this person, and I was at the. I'm going to tell a story. I was at the hospital this week. I was called by. They said they're going to be here today. We'll see. By someone who was here. When did Redding start coming? When did Catherine die? 3 years ago. It's been quite a while ago. They came for a while and then haven't. And they call me when a crisis happens, and I always go and I always see them, and whatever I can do. And this one was her mom was dying, and went to the hospital ministering to her. Well, in the process, there was somebody a little bit older than me, in their 60s probably, who the doctor came in and sat down. While we were in the waiting room, doctor came in and sat down right in front of him to say, your son's going to die today. He's 42 years old.
Oh.
And had the opportunity to minister to this husband, wife, and the girlfriend. He walked out and said, oh my goodness, I was just told, and he's weeping, and just kind of blah to me. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm a pastor. How can I help? Oh, please go see my wife and the girlfriend. And so we just spent some time there that day, and then called CJ. Hey, we need food up here. We got a bunch of people. Death is happening. They can't leave. They need to eat. So CJ showed up with a whole bunch of Subway sandwiches.
Good for her.
And so, initially it's for Erica and her family, but I said bring extra because I want to, serve Leonard and Elaine. And so they were like so unbelievably grateful. He reaches in his pocket and he gives me $20. And I said, this is a gift. He said, I'd like you to gift it again. I can't believe you would do this thing. And, it's such a simple thing to do.
Yeah.
It's such an easy thing to do. So can we do that where we're living and working? That's what I get out of this.
That's a great thing to get out of this. Absolutely. And that's in the context also, they were worried about attacks from the enemy.
Yes.
And that's one of the things where we've got to prepare ourselves.
Yes.
And to a certain extent, they armored themselves with spears and
Yes, they
swords and shields and that kind of stuff. But we need to armor ourselves as well.
That's right.
With spiritual armor, and we also got to get over ourselves and say, it's okay if we get attacked. We'll be prepared.
Right.
And we need to get over ourselves and look for those opportunities.
But be vigilant at the same time.
Yes.
And I think that that's both physical and spiritual both.
Mhm.
So when we're out and about, Tara wanted to, there's a gal at the off-ramp here coming south, there's a gal at the off ramp that's sitting there. A sign says "Tired of sleeping outside." She looks like she's I don't know, to me she looked like she was probably tweaking. And so Tara saw her, I saw her, and then Tara saw her when she came in. She says, "Mom, I want to take her food. Do we have something?" And I said, "We don't." And well, I want to go, get her something. Okay, great. We'll go to McDonald's and get her breakfast or something. And so somebody needs to go. Don't go by yourself.
Yeah.
That's a really amazing thing to do, but don't go by yourself. And so Edgar went with her, and they had a nice moment with this gal, Chrissy, is her name, not our Chrissy. Another Chrissy. So just be careful.
Yeah.
When we had our street ministry in Wenatchee, be smart. Be smart.
Yeah. Well, how did Jesus send them out by?
2 by 2.
2 by 2s.
That's right. You don't go by yourself, especially in this world.
Mm-hmm.
So be smart. Be weaponed up with Jesus, and be aware of your surroundings. But don't let it stop you.
But don't let it stop you. So I was met with Nelson on Thursday,
Yes.
and his prayer every day is send somebody, to meet me. Who am I supposed to talk to, and and he's forever buying someone breakfast, lunch, whatever, and he's moved about 3 months ago, so whatever it was.
Oh, right, their new place.
In their new place, and now so he's always praying that, and now one day he especially prayed that, and there's like 10 people, and he's going, in different places, and he's going, Mark, that's too many. But
I'm gonna skip a praying.
and he gets, well, you said,
You're right.
and he goes, but I'm going, well, that's why Jesus says that, the harvest is there, but the workers are few.
Right.
And he's going,
His prayer needs to be, who is my partner?
Yes.
He needs a partner.
So he's realizing that, yes, we need to do more, and I can't do it all I can't physically do it all myself.
That's right.
So it's opening his eyes even more about what needs to be done.
Right. Right. And we need to be looking for people, and whatever it is that we're doing, teaching Sabbath school, or the Nelson that's reaching out, or whatever it is that we've been gifted to do, we need to be discipling all the time, and having someone that we're working with that is learning alongside.
So it's definitely is discernment, and definitely being active of what you're seeing, because it's so easy to do this and not see it.
That's right. That's right. You pass right by.
You pass right by him, and I'm not saying you're being a jerk, but you're not opening your eyes to what could be there.
Well, it's Ezekiel 16. It's the one that's been thrown out, abandoned, rejected, and everyone walks by. People go by, but there are no eyes that have compassion. And so Chrissy out here on the corner, there's Tara saw her and had compassion, and it says, and Edgar went with her. It's will we notice?
Yes. And so sometimes, like I say, it is definitely us noticing, and that's being intentional. So sometimes we need to be a lot more intentional, but being intentional is also taking Edgar.
That's
taking
right.
Whoever with you.
That's right.
Because you need to.
That's right. We need to do this together. Brenda tells a story of Melody. They were driving somewhere, and Melody had a sandwich, and they went past someone on the street, and they stop a lot and help. And Brenda drove past this person, and Melody got very upset. "Mommy, we have to give him my sandwich. We have to do that." And Brenda's like, "No, I got to get to this place." And Melody was just insistent. No, and I think she even might have said something along the line, Jesus said we're supposed to give him this sandwich. So Brenda says, "Oh, well, we should do what God wants to do." So she turned around, and they parked somewhere, and they had to walk to this person. So they walk to the person, and Melody gives him her, I think it was a man, gives him her sandwich. And then they go walk back to the car because, that was supposed to do. And they start driving away. And now Melody's crying again. "What's the matter?" "Well, now I'm hungry." So this, a 4-year-old saying, we got to, he needs to have my sandwich. He's hungry. But now I'm hungry.
Yeah.
It's okay to be hungry.
It's okay.
So she took him out and she bought him something to eat, which she wouldn't normally,
Yeah.
she would not have done. And
Yeah.
she said, well, see where the blessing is? The blessing is you blessed him with your food, and we weren't planning this. I wouldn't have done this
Yeah.
otherwise. But now we're going to go get some out.
Very nice. So, next 2 weeks we're not going to have Sabbath school.
Right.
And then
2 weeks we will.
2 weeks we will. And then 2 weeks we won't because of camp meeting.
I have an idea.
What?
What if you challenged those who come
Yeah.
to have some testimony time about, where they live, work, and play?
Okay.
What kind of encounters have you had?
Okay. I'll get something and we'll get it out in the e-news too.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
I was going to start Revelation, but you brought up the
I
point
know.
that it would be too chopped up.
That's just
It would
silly.
be way chopped up.
Way-
And
Yeah, wait till the fall.
yeah. So we'll do different things this summer for Sabbath school.
Yes.
But it will be
well,
interesting.
we
and
might
fun.
not have Sabbath school this summer.
Yeah, that's true too.
Probably just have a short service and go out because we can't be here
Yeah.
most of the summer.
And who knows, we might be working on a new building by then.
Who knows? We might be. That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and close with some prayer.
Can I just say? I just
Oh,
want to say
absolutely.
thank you. The teeny pieces that I've been able to be here, I really have appreciated this study. It's been very, very good.
Thank you.
And I've appreciated the
Thank
input
you.
that
Edgar, for
Edgar for.
your big piece too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys, both of you, for what you've done. It's good.
Okay.
All right.
Heavenly Father, thank you that you're with us. Thank you that you're leading us. Please help us to be intentional. Please help us to see the opportunities. Just to be with people. We don't always, and shouldn't always, immediately go up and start talking about the state of the dead or anything like that, but be able to just talk with people and let them know that they are important. And let us know and understand that they are children of God, worthy of dignity, love, and respect. And help us to see people like that and interact with them, not as a project, but as individuals. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you.